Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We are on episode 117. And usually when we record this early, it's pre-gym, but right now it's post-gym.
Yep.
Got a quick leg workout, and not too quick, but I mean, in terms of the amount of volume that we fit in a relatively brief period of time and warming up and stuff like that. I'm pretty neurotic when it comes to lower body training about warming up. Not necessarily because of like I'm anal about it or anything, but just because I need to be physically.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's an age thing or whatever, but I think as I've gotten older,
because I'm the same way.
Yeah, I've had to implement more and more of some mobility and different like loading tactics versus when I was younger, you just throw on weight. So leg days for us, truthfully, kind of take quite a bit. Yeah. But I mean, to be fair, that's just the name of the game at this point, I guess.
Absolutely. To be honest, I was a little nervous for today because, the listeners don't know, but I had a slight hip injury early in the week and kind of took the rest of the week off. I trained back last night light to see how I felt. And coming in today for leg day, I knew we were going to squat heavy, and I was a little nervous, but it was great.
Well, the auto-regulatory thing is really important for people to be able to discern between pain and injury.
Right.
Like, is this just pain and soreness, or is it actually some type of acute injury that needs addressed or recovered or whatever? And when you go through your different modalities of like diagnostics, it's like, okay, because the cause could be the cure.
Right.
What you think is causing the pain could actually in essence help it.
Right.
Or like you don't know if it's like antagonistic, like does it need more stretching and lengthening, or does it need more strengthening and contracting and neurological like input. So it's whenever you have an issue, especially one that seems orthopedic, it may not necessarily be that. It could be tissue related and stuff, so you kind of have to go around it and try to problem solve, which if you train long enough, you kind of get pretty abreast to that. Just by the nature of being in the gym and understanding how your body works and how you feel. And we kind of beat the dead horse a million times with that over the years of people needing to be much more in tune with their bodies and stuff. And one way you can get in tune with your bodies is actually hiring a coach or someone that knows what they're doing. So let's stop the BS for a minute and cut to the chase. So we actually have a guest on today. So we are slowly building towards our New Year's resolution, or my New Year's resolution that I put out, which is kind of a mutual goal to have, multiple guests on this year. So without further ado, we're going to welcome Austin Culver, who is a fitness and lifestyle coach, to the show, who's up and coming. So Austin, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on. Heard a lot of great things about the show from Justin, and started listening to it myself a couple months back, and you guys do great work.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. It's actually pretty nice because it's funny because I'll have people that I don't know, and Justin and I, Austin, we talk about this all the time, where we'll have people that we don't know tell us that they listen to it like religiously every week. And then some of my best friends, like I had a guy who's actually one of my clients, one of my online clients, who I'd known from the gym for a couple years now, probably about 2 years, Tommy Guns, shout out to Tommy Guns. And he said to me the other day, he said, man, I listened to your guys' podcast for the first time. He's like, I didn't even know you had a podcast. And part of me wanted to say, dude, do you live under a rock? But then the other part of me was like, wow, I feel like that's kind of a necessary reality check for Justin and I, because we always talk about promoting it more and being more like outward with it. And if someone that I know from the gym and talk to on literally a daily basis doesn't even know I do it, then that's kind of something to be said about our lack of effort towards it.
Yeah, it definitely shows a spot where we're lacking.
Yeah, we're deficient there.
Deficient, that was the word I was looking for.
So Austin, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that's kind of the cliche starting point for most people. Like, how'd you get started? Who are you? What do you do? Kind of that whole thing. And then just let the conversation transpire accordingly.
Yeah, sounds good. So I've been into fitness for a few years now. So I'm still a rookie. Haven't been in, nearly as long as you, Charlie, but I love anything and everything there is to know about fitness. Over these past couple months, I've been working to get certified as a nutrition coach. And I also instruct fitness classes at my local gym alongside my wife. My training is based more around performance and mobility. So moving like an athlete in and out of the gym. And I've spent the better half of the last 18 months training in Muay Thai and just falling in love with the sport. When I'm not coaching it in the gym, I'm most likely, studying some new random article about like muscle hypertrophy or some other random fitness topic. So pretty much just in all aspects of my my life, I like learning about basically the same thing that you guys talk about on the show, and just completely, investing myself and my time and energy into this. So that way, in hopes that I can help other people later in my life, change their lifestyle, start eating a more balanced and healthy diet, and, getting them into the gym, because the longevity of that is, unparalleled. And I think, fitness is a blessing, and, it truly is something that we should never take for granted.
Well, I'm going to hit on that right there. There's a lot to touch on. And I feel like there's, first of all, a lot of parallelism between us, like you alluded to, but then also you said fitness is a blessing. And I've had some conversations somewhat recently with people about, I don't understand. And it's just because like, this is a genuine interest to the three of us. So naturally you're going to enjoy what you do if you're interested in it. But it's crazy to me, the number of people that view fitness like a job or something that they have to do, and or like a burden, especially when, like you said, it's a blessing. And the reason that I find that so astounding is because for someone like yourself who trains people in multiple areas and multiple domains, and your own training is structured with a little bit of balance and around multiple kind of disciplines, so to speak, there's so much that people can do. So like, you don't have to look at fitness as, oh, it's lifting weights, or oh, it's running, or oh, it's dieting. There are so many things, and Justin and I try to talk about that all the time about, no, I don't want to use the term functional training, but just like the ability to move is a discipline that someone could focus in almost entirely.
There's modalities.
Yeah, for sure. And
there's modalities.
With us, at least me, I don't want to speak for Justin, but one of the issues that I run into is wanting to be good at everything. And so it's kind of like the jack of all trades, but like master of none, because I'm so focused on, okay, like I want to improve my mobility, which is not going to take away from other goals. But for example, this summer I did a bunch of obstacle course races, and I had a blast, and they were really, really fun. But, after one of my races, it was a 10-mile, I think it was a 10-mile, 30 some obstacle race. And I lost like 15 pounds afterwards and had a tough time getting it back. So it's like little things like that that are kind of counterproductive to what I do. So I actually think that I'm the opposite. And most people don't have something to focus on, but I have the issue where I try to focus on too much. So how is your like training with yourself kind of adapted over the years? You said you're more into like mobility work and Muay Thai. Has it always been that way, or were you focused on wanting to look good first? Like what kind of sparked you into it?
Yeah. So, I mean, with me being a younger guy, so I'm 24, when I first got into fitness, and I think this was a very similar story for many guys like us, is you see the cover of a magazine or you see someone on TV and they're just jacked to the gills. And you're like, man, I want to look like that guy. And you have this, very skewed misconception of what fitness really is. And you get into it and you buy all the supplements and you work out like a machine for 2 hours a day, and you're eating nothing but chicken breast rice and broccoli. We've all been in that boat, and as you mature and you learn a little bit more, you're like, hey, this training modality is probably not the most sustainable for me, because I'm just killing myself every single day when I go into the gym. No recovery, probably under eating calories by 1,000 for what my maintenance is, because I'm eating the same thing, small portions every single day, even if it was 6 times a day. And you just kind of fall into this cliche loophole of what, society and fitness marketing tells you to do. Take this if you want to get jacked, or, follow this workout program in the back of a magazine if you want to get a chest like Arnold. And I think a lot of people fall into that loophole. And I ended up taking a little bit of a hiatus because I stopped seeing results. I had the quote unquote newbie gains, and I didn't adapt my training. So I wasn't seeing any results. It became stagnant. So I got down on myself like many people do. And I took a little bit too much time for comfort off. And I looked in the mirror one day and I was like, man, I got to do this again. And I got to figure it out this time. So what I ended up doing is I started investing all my time and energy into what was sustainable for me. And for me, I enjoy aesthetics, as many people do. Everyone who goes to the gym, whether they want to say it or not, they want to look better. It's just a small part of what the gym is. And I kind of adopted this new slogan where if you chase health, aesthetics will follow. So I, based my training around more performance and mobility because that's what's sustainable for me right now. I don't have to be in the gym doing a 5x5 trying to PR once a week. It's just not what I want to do. I want to be able to, like I said, move like an athlete in and out of the gym. So in my daily life, if I go on a hike and I'm walking for 5 miles, I want to be able to do that without any, pains or aches and my IT band tightening up and my hip flexors, they're all tight. I don't want that. So when I adapted to the more mobility side of it, I was like, hey, something that would be a great parallel for this would be Muay Thai. Because with Muay Thai, you're throwing round kicks, you're engaging your hips, you're engaging your posterior chain. I mean, it's everything in it. You have to have some form of mobility. So when I adopted both of those training modalities, I then had to figure out, okay, what's my frequency and what's my volume going to look like? Because I love lifting, but at the same time, if I'm training, almost like high intensity cardio 2 days a week with Muay Thai, I have to find a good balance. So for me lately, it's been 3 full days of full body, spreading out my volume and, throughout the week. So I'm not killing myself every single day that I'm in there, as I would with say, just like isolation movements. And then 2 times a week, I go in there and I do about an hour to an hour and a half of Muay Thai. So that's kind of how my progression went. And, with any progression in the gym, many people think it's going to be linear. I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to eat right, and it's going to shoot right up. No, sometimes you have to fall on your face. You're going to get sand kicked in your face. It's going to happen. And that's how you learn to fall in love with the journey. And that's what makes everything sustainable. Because, as a nation, we don't have a weight loss problem. We have a keeping weight off problem. People do diets every single year. Millions of people do. They lose the weight and then they go right back to doing what they were doing before and they gain all that weight back. Well, I know I went on a little bit tangent there, but
no, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I saw this quote. It was perfect in regards to that. It said, and this is nothing specific to the ketogenic diet. It was just the quote itself was about the ketogenic diet. And it said, if keto works every time you do it, then it doesn't.
Exactly.
Basically suggesting the fact that if you do a diet that's sustainable, you won't have to continue to, quote, do it multiple times. It's like a lifestyle and you don't restart or whatever. I like what you said too about the aesthetics and focusing on what was the phrase you used?
Yes, it was chase health and aesthetics follow. So that's actually not coined by me. That is a quote by Sal Stefano. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's pretty prominent in the fitness space. Yes.
Yep.
Yes, that is a mind pump quote. So that's shout out to Sal.
You said that because that's immediately where my mind went because they talk about that a lot. And I've kind of engendered the same thing in myself too with my athletes is because again, like you said, everybody wants to look good, whether they like it or not, or whether they admit it or not. Everybody wants to have like some semblance of recognition for how they look if they're going to the gym or getting involved in fitness. And I tell my athletes all the time, like performance first, because I know so many people that focus on trying to look good. And the overwhelming majority of people that look better don't focus on looking good. They focus on performing well. So like you said, with the health, like if you're focusing on eating all the right foods, you're focusing on mastering the performance and movement of your body, your aesthetics or how you look is going to follow suit and you're going to look bigger. You're going to look leaner. Those things are really going to take care of themselves. Like one thing that I'm pretty adamant on is mastering execution of movement. So don't focus on, like, if you're trying to build your chest muscles, don't try to focus on the chest itself, especially if you're a beginner. Focus on getting very, very good at like a specific exercise or two and looking at those as like specific skill sets. So for example, the bench press, like I don't know anybody that bench presses over 400 pounds that doesn't have a huge chest. And you could say that for essentially every body part. If someone is, obviously there are outliers, but 99% of people who have a very, very, very strong lift have a very, very large body part that translates, right to the lift. So I really, really like how you said that, to focus on your health first and foremost, because I think that that's like someplace where people miss the boat. So when you work with some of your clients, do you feel like you have to have that discussion regularly because they are kind of right intentions and all the right, all the right motivation, but it's just misdirected in the wrong direction?
Yeah. So actually, I coach alongside my wife. So my wife is into this just as much as I am. So Janelle, if you're going to listen to this, thanks for doing all you do. Sorry, subtle flex there.
Subtle plug.
But yeah, subtle plug. But no, yeah, we have that conversation all the time. And that's one of the first conversations that we have when, doing an intake call with a new client is, we ask them why they want to do this. And for a mass majority of the demographic that we work with, it's because I want to lose weight. I want to look better in my clothes. I want to look better for my husband. And I never really hear, I want to move better so I can pick up my kids or my grandkids, or I want to be able to go to a grocery store and walk around and push the cart and not have nagging pain in my knee. And it's something that has to be addressed very quickly because a lot of the past clients that we've worked with, they have tried a diet in the past, or they tried some workout routine. And a mass majority of what, the fitness industry, or quote unquote, I use that term loosely, fitness industry puts out to the mass demographic is very poor information. And I think you guys can agree with that. When you go to a grocery store and you look in the aisle and it says how Rachel Ray lost 20 pounds in 2 weeks, people see that and they think it's like, that's the come all be all. And they look at that magazine and they read it and they're like, well, I'm going to do exactly what Rachel Ray did. And the thing is that, changing your lifestyle can't be so cookie cutter. You have different things in your life that are going to impact how you need to delegate when you eat, your meal timing, how much you eat, and the way that you train. And many people think that, well, if I just do keto because my aunt did it, then I'm going to have the same results. And we really have to slow down, pump the brakes, and be like, hey, we have to negate all that kind of thinking up front. Because at the end of the day, everything is going to come full circle. We just have to adapt it around what you need specifically.
That's a big problem with coaches that I see too is, and truthfully, the client expectations need to be laid out really, really clear up front. That's one of the things that I've ran into in the past is the differentiating for people, like pretty clearly the difference between optimal and sustainable or practical. So I'll give people, like, talk through plans with people and work around their lifestyle and have certain food choices and certain meal times. And unfortunately, I've had this before where they would take the plan that was constructed or the things that we talked about, and why you would pay someone and then go to someone else for advice, I'm not really sure, but they would show it to someone else and say, what do you think about this? And there's been instances, very, very few, but it has happened where people would show the plan to someone else and they say, well, I don't see why he has you doing this, or you shouldn't be doing that. But there's no context there. Like, yeah, I know that fundamentally that plan doesn't look perfect, but what you didn't tell your friend when you showed him the diet plan we worked up was all your food sensitivities, your hectic work schedule that kind of negates the optimal eating times, or the lack of sleep that you're getting, or what you're currently doing. And we need to slowly work away from that so it's a sustainable practice and not just throw you on a diet cold turkey, and all these like little nuanced things that go into it. And so I think that one thing that's really, really important when you work with your clients, and I'm sure you agree with this, is letting them know that, hey, this plan on paper isn't perfect yet. It's going to be perfect as your lifestyle allows it to be a little bit more perfect. But for now, we just need to kind of slowly transition you out of where you're at and into where you need to go. So one of the things that I try to do with that is every new client that I work with, I give them several months in advance of an outline, even if, because with all my online stuff is month to month. So someone could sign up for a month, and we just renew every month, and there's really no certainty. I don't like give discounts for people who sign up for longer periods of time or anything like that. But even if I don't know what their intentions are signing up, if it's going to be 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, because a lot of times finances dictate that. But what I do is, regardless of what their intentions are, when I give them their initial plan and we talk it over, there's always a several month outline. Like, hey, if you sign up in February, this is what February is going to look like and why. And then this is what March and April are probably going to look like and why. And then as we transition into May and June, these are the things that are probably going to happen as a result of the changes we started with. So now we're going to have to fix this, and kind of give them almost like a
extended forecast.
Yeah, exactly. Like a forecast of what's going to happen. So that way they understand why the progress may not I don't want to say doesn't seem fast, but there's certain health parameters and all these little nuanced things that we got to fix first. Like the one thing that comes to my mind is when I worked with a coach for one of my shows who was an IFBB pro. He told me, he said, we could load you up on a ton of drugs and you could win any show around. He said, but do you want to do this for a couple years or do you want to do this for your whole life? And so it's like, hey, we're not going to aim for just killing everybody at the local show in 6 months. We're going to aim to make you as good as we can in 15 years from now when you're hitting your stride or whatever. So I definitely think that clarifying it with clients is super important. So like moving forward with that, what are some of the biggest issues? And this doesn't have to be communication, like lack of expectations or understanding where the train is headed, so to speak. What are just some of the biggest pitfalls that you have with clients, whether it's in the online space or even in person? Like, is there some commonalities amongst all the people that you work with that kind of like tend to raise their ugly head, so to speak, that you constantly find yourself like correcting or redirecting with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things is, a lot of clients, they come in with a lot of motivation, and I'm a big fan of motivation. I think it's a good tool to have in your toolbox. But when you only use motivation, I think we can all agree there's days where, even people like us who, absolutely adore fitness, we wake up and we're like, dang, I got to go to the gym today. And your motivation tank is just empty. So a lot of my clients, they come to me, and when they come to me specifically, that's when they're at their peak of motivation, because they've realized something inherently that they don't like about their body, or that their health markers are saying is off. They're really motivated to make change. And I take that with a grain of salt. And I always tell people, think of motivation along these lines. So think of your car as the one-way path to your goal. And one day you go out to start your car, but your battery is dead. So you have to use jumper cables, and think of your jumper cables as your motivation. The first couple of times that you go out there, you're going to be able to start your car by using motivation to jumpstart it, to try to ease your way to your goal. But eventually that battery is going to be so dead that not even jumper cables motivation is going to help you. So think about discipline and instilling new habits as just a brand new battery. We are never going to have to go out there and try to use jumper cables. You're going to be able just to turn your key, fire it right up, and move towards your goal. And another thing is you don't have to go 120 and a 70 to get to your goal. We can do this sustainably. And that's where a lot of people, they come in, and I wish it was easy as eat less, move more. And I understand that's a lot of thermodynamics, but at the end of the day, we have to take a step back and we have to say, what is going on in your current life that would inhibit this from happening? And like Charlie, I really like what you did with, that direct outline. Hey, it's not perfect, but it's going to become perfect as we move forward, because that client, they might need their macros adjusted as their metabolism speeds up, or, if they're progressing in the gym and they're getting stronger, maybe they need a little bit more food to get them through their workouts. So one of the biggest things is just, coming in with that eager beaver mindset of I'm motivated, cut my calories, make me sweat, make me sore, and we'll call it a workout. And that's another thing that I see a lot in my in-person stuff, is that people come into my class. My class is based loosely around like a resistance training / kind of high intensity cardio training kind of style. It's not CrossFit, but it's very loosely based on just getting in there, learning the fundamentals of movements. And a lot of people come in and they have this expectation that I'm just going to absolutely kill them. Like, hey, I want to walk out of here, crawling out my hands and knees. And that's not my goal as a trainer. And I know a lot of trainers base their value as a trainer off of, well, hey, look at my client. They just walked out and they're sweating their butt off and they're limping because I just made them do XYZ amount of leg movements. It's like, that's not my goal. I don't want my client to be so sore the next day that they wake up and they're like, I don't want to come back to the gym. That hurt, So yeah, that's kind of my biggest thing, is just, understanding how you can instill habits and how many tools that you can put in your toolbox, and using all those tools at different periods in your life, not just relying on motivation as the only thing that's going to get you out of bed in the morning.
Well, I think that it's definitely something. So I run into that all the time too, is people, and then again, it goes back to client expectations, and then that's why communication with them is so important. Where people, I mean, you hit the nail on the head perfectly as far as I'm concerned, just in my own experience with people that come in and they expect to be absolutely destroyed, and they kind of rate their trainer on a scale of the best trainer being who was the most difficult. Oh, and I tell people, okay, let's say you want to get a better lower body. I can make you do thousands of air squats every time I see you. You can come in and just air squat for an hour straight, and there's no way your lower body is going to feel worse than that. It's going to feel absolutely crushed to the core. Now, is that going to do anything in terms of growing your legs? Maybe a little bit from the initial stimulus, but ultimately not too much.
Yeah.
And the same thing with someone who comes in and wants bigger arms. If you're looking just for a pump or something to burn or feel like you got a great workout, I could have you take 5-pound dumbbells and curl for an hour, and you're definitely going to feel like you got a good workout. But is the stimulus going to elicit the response that you're looking for? No. So I like with my athletes, especially because that's kind of the overwhelming majority of my in-person people are athlete based. And I tell them all the time, we're trying to get better performance out of you. And sometimes that doesn't mean having a hard workout or a difficult workout. The best workout is the workout you need that day, which I think that, again, it all goes back to communication of expectations. My athletes understand that over years of me beating in their head, that I'll have days where the autoregulatory stuff. So for people that are outside of the industry, especially in a training sense, that auto regulation is just where you're in charge of what happens. So you could have a certain program that says, okay, you got to do 5 sets of 5 reps. But if you're feeling really, really good that day, maybe you're able to do a couple more sets because you have the energy, or you could down regulate it a little bit and say, okay, I only need to do 3 because I'm kind of tired today. So my athletes have gotten really, really good. And I got to give them all the credit in the world for this, is they've gotten really good at coming in with a little bit of some say in what we do. And that's one thing that I've always tried to instill in them is, hey, this is your car. I'm just helping you steer it, but ultimately you're the person driving. So I'll say that they'll come in and say, hey, Charlie, I did a little bit more lower body volume than I would typically do this week. Could we make our movement session a little bit shorter and focus more on strength today? And I'll say, yeah, we'll do some brief movement stuff and then we'll go hit upper body. Or, hey, Charlie, I have a showcase this weekend. So neurologically, I don't know if I can go in and hit a really high volume strength workout, and because I'll be sore 2 days later when I have to time my 60 or whatever it is. And I think that as a coach, that's one of the most important things you can do in person too, not just online, because I know we talked about it online with the diet stuff, but in person too, is just clarifying to people what the expectations are and how you go about things and what they should kind of get out of you. Because I think that people look at a trainer like myself or like you or whatever, and they think that everything has to be crushed to the highest degree possible, and that would be effective, especially for people who are inexperienced. Like Justin would be a perfect example of this, how his training has adapted very, very progressively. Because like Justin, I mean, when we first started, you were
a wreck,
and it was like your workout was, I was doing very, very low steady state cardio for a show one year. And because that was when we first started, right?
When we first started,
when I started my prep, and Justin would do some walking with me. And it was to the point initially where we would do what?
2 miles. It was like the beginning.
Yeah. And that was a slow 2 miles and a difficult 2 miles.
That was the hardest thing at the time, that was the hardest thing I ever did.
And previous to that, before you and I started doing it together, when you kind of started on this quote journey yourself, you were doing like 1 lap.
Yeah.
It was like a quarter mile.
Yeah. Quarter mile, then 3/4 of a mile. And I stuck at 3/4 for a long time. I was really big. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, it was hard. It was the hardest, but I think that's like important to emphasize, is like what's hard now might not be hard tomorrow. So you have to be able to change.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I want to ask you real quick along these lines too. What do you think is to blame for that? Is it because it's probably multiple influences? Do you think it's social media, where everything's sensationalized, and that's why it looks like people want to be crushed and want to have these videos of their clients throwing up, or the client wants to be drenched in sweat to kind of essentially prove how hard they work, so to speak? Or do you think it's comparison? Like maybe not social media, maybe it's comparison. Like they see other people doing things at the gym that look really, really good and say, oh, well, if I want to look like that girl, I have to do these crazy workouts that she does. Or if I want to look like that dude, I have to lift all the heavy load that he does. Do you think it's like social media? Is it comparison? Why do people have this mentality that they want to go into the gym and just get absolutely crushed by a trainer because that's going to give them the best results?
So I think social media definitely comes into play, but it's a little mix of everything. Everything comes full circle, especially when, everyone that goes into the gym, you have an ego, and ego is not a bad word. It's not. And people think that if you have an ego or if you go to the gym, there's this misconception that you just want to be this big hulking bodybuilder, or you're one of the soccer moms who does like the spinning classes. And there's a stark misconception. There's a lot of people in the middle, with different training modalities that, enjoy different aspects of fitness. So when you get online, and it's really hard for, younger people getting into it, where they're influenced by these up and coming social media people. And, many of these guys that are putting out this information, like say, hey, buy my cookie cutter program and take my sponsored supplement company supplements so I can get a kickback. A lot of these guys, they're most likely on PEDs or, some form of performance enhancing drug to get to that physique. And when people don't understand, physiologically how that works, and, the amount of, what am I looking for? A lot of these people that are putting out this information, they're unfortunately not in it for the same reasons that we're in it. They're in it because maybe they can get another couple $1,000s from their sponsorship, and they're just putting out information for the hell of it. So yeah, I mean, social media is definitely a big factor, and that's what happened to me. I was young and I was impressionable, and I got online and I saw some guy who was just shredded, and I wanted to look like him. And I would go in and I'd spend 2 hours at the gym doing the same thing, just supersetting everything and trying to get the biggest pump possible. Because back then I was so naive that I thought, well, if I just get a big pump, then I have to be doing something. I'm sending a stimulus to my body. But in reality, by the time that I got done, I just did a glorified cardio session because I just ran around so much. I wasn't really sending a muscle building signal at that point. I was just exhausting myself.
Yes.
And then it does go into comparison. It does, because, there's always a bigger fish. Whether your goal is to be, an Instagram model, one of the girls, or you want to be a jacked bodybuilder, there's both sides to the parallel there for, both men and women. So yeah, when you go into the gym and you see someone who's doing more, hypertrophy training, high sets, high reps, and they're a big jacked bodybuilder, and you look at that and you're like, well, that's what I need to do. Bobby Big Arms over there is just cranking it out. That's what I need to do. When in reality, it's like, well, maybe you probably shouldn't. You should probably, try to work out to the best of what you can right now with your current fitness level. And I want to also put some of the blame on current trainers who go in there and they think that their worth as a trainer is based off of how hard they can push their client. And then when their client retention is super low and they're wondering why, it's like, well, you pushed them so hard that they're still recovering. So they missed their next session with you. And it's just, it's a balance. It really is. It's how can you elicit the most results in the shortest amount of time? And how can you balance that so you're still getting optimal recovery? And, what is your sleep like? What's your nutrition like? And everything comes full circle. It's not just buy this protein powder, go crush your arms for an hour and hope they grow. There's a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah.
And I have a question for Justin. Justin, I've been blessed to talk to you before this, and I heard a lot about your story, and first and foremost, it's absolutely inspiring, and I've actually used you as an example for some people in my life that want to make a change. And I'm like, hey, look, this is where he was, this is where he's at. So for you, think back to when you were at your heaviest point. What was the best piece of advice that you got that I could tell, clients in a similar position?
The best piece of advice that I got when I was at my heaviest weight. Don't quit.
Yeah.
Like literally just, it doesn't matter at that point when you're at that low of a low spot, something's better than nothing. So don't quit. If your something is, I'm not going to eat junk food this week, or even to get more specific, I'm not going to eat snack cakes this week. Yeah. Don't quit. Don't allow yourself to give in, because you're one break away from the next step into your journey. But that break is the hardest thing you'll ever do until the next hardest thing. So, and I can't remember who told me that, and they didn't tell me all of that. They told me don't quit. And I want to think it was, I can't remember if it was my brother or my other brother, my actual brother or my best friend, who I basically is like my brother. One of them told me don't quit, and I can't remember who it was, but don't quit. And I used it for a long time. And like, if you look at my Instagram name is, I stole it. It's not mine. I didn't come up with it, but Team Never Quit. Marcus Luttrell came up with that, coined that. And I fell in love with it because it's true. Like, no matter what the setbacks you come across, don't ever quit, because it's not worth it.
Yeah.
You're worth more than quitting.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, even though, when you sit back and you think don't quit, a lot of people are like, well, of course, that's easier said than done, but it's just a snowball effect. Yeah. And that's one thing that my wife and I, we tell our clients is, hey, instead of ripping a ton of things out of their life that they enjoy, we just try to add something new. So, hey, if you're not, normally eating, a decent portion of vegetables a day, let's just try to add that in. And they're so preoccupied on just hitting that one goal that they're not thinking about reaching for the Coke or, the snack cakes or something like that.
Yeah. And I like that.
Yeah. And doing something like that will just allow them to realize that they feel like they're in control of, creating that change in their life, because they're not being told to rip something that they enjoy out of their life. They're being told just to add something new. Yeah. And that gives them a sensibility of control. And that's important, because, a lot of people think coaches are here just to be a drill sergeant. It's like, no, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to help you. We're here to guide you down your path so you can find the most sustainable way to reach that goal to where you still enjoy life. And that's what I also tell people all the time is that, playing back to the misconception aspect, Charlie, what you originally asked me was, don't have this misconception that every time you go into the gym, you have to be this, do this crazy superset and hit cardio circuit. Just fall in love with the journey. Just fall in love with the process. If your alarm goes off in the morning and it says, go to the gym, get up, get your shaker bottle, put on your tennis shoes. When you get in your car to drive to the gym, put on your favorite pump up song, fall in love with every aspect of that, that journey, fall in love with the chime that goes off in the gym when you open the door, fall in love with the smell of the gym, the rubber, hearing the sounds, the weights clanking together. And that sounds super cliche, but it really is important. Because if you fall in love with that, that's going to be so instilled in everything that you do in your daily life that you're never going to forget when you're out of the gym that, hey, when I went down there and I, kicked that, can I swear on the show?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. When I went down there and I kicked ass, I felt really good about that. And that made me feel great. And you're going to retain that in the back of your mind. So when you go home, you're more apt to make better choices. Instead of reaching for the snack cake, hey, I'm hungry. I need to, sustain. So I'm going to get a protein bar, or I'm going to make myself a nice piece of, grilled chicken. So, I mean, yeah, that's definitely something that's important is, just don't quit.
And I think that's why, or one of the benefits to Justin and I structuring our day with early morning workouts, because like you said, you kind of tend to make a little bit better choices and respond to things a little bit more goal oriented of a mindset when you start your day like that. So one thing that I really wanted to touch on, Austin, that you mentioned earlier, kind of going to open up a whole different can of worms here. I want to talk a little bit about ego. So before we go into that, because again, this is going to kind of be a whole different topic. Let's go to a quick commercial break, and then we'll talk more about ego when we come back.
As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram and order your delicious baked goods today, because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well.
And we are back from our commercial break. Okay, so prior to the break, I mentioned that I wanted to talk a little bit about ego, because you said something about it, Austin, and I thought that your mentality towards it was perfect, because I think that I don't know why, but this is something that like is kind of condemned in the fitness industry a lot, is how let me pause for a minute and not say fitness industry. This is condemned everywhere, where ego is looked at as something that's bad. And that happens all the time, where if you are egotistical, especially in the fitness realm, that's looked at as something that is like the worst offense that you could have. And if you have any type of ego, then you're a horrible person in the gym. And I've always been one of those people personally where I think that ego is not only okay and acceptable, but I think that to some degree it's a good thing. Like a lot of times in the gym, people who are really serious, it's kind of like in school where the kids that are really athletic pick on the kids that aren't athletic, or the kids that are really rich pick on the kids that don't have any money. Now, I'm not saying that that happens with everyone, but that's kind of like kind of the cliche thing that you see a lot. Well, I get this a lot where I have people that always make fun of other people for like flexing in the mirror, lifting up their shirt, and they call them all kinds of names like, oh, look how small that guy is, and all he's doing is flexing. Whereas even if you're, regardless of if you're big or small, I think that that person is just genuinely interested in their own progress. Like you said, it's okay to want to look good, because I know so many people, and this is a bodybuilding specific thing. I know so many people that say, oh, I don't train to look good, or I don't train to be strong. I just train because it's all about the personal journey, which is true, but you could have a personal journey with anything. Like the reason you're doing this and the reason why you're gravitating towards this specifically is because you want to look good. Like it's okay to tell people, hey, I'm in this because I want to look jacked. I'm in this because I just want to have better arms. Like in the coaching world, a lot of coaches, and I'm sure you've kind of been abreast to this because you've been in it long enough to see it, Austin, where a lot of coaches will get stuff like, and the coach's mentality towards it is poor. Well, they'll have clients come in and say, oh, well, I just want to get a little bit leaner when I go on vacation. I just want to get some abs for the beach. And then, of course, that elicits a response from the coaches. Well, you know, this isn't for you. You got to be more dedicated than that, and you need to set higher goals. And for me, it's like, why? Like, not everybody should be a bodybuilder. I say all the time on the podcast that bodybuilding's stupid. It's time consuming. It's financially restricting. Like, I hate it, but I can't control that I want to do it. It's just something like innate in me. But like, I think that whatever the person's goals are, that should be okay with a coach. So like if you had people where you've kind of thought that their goals were a little bit, I don't really know what the word is, not ambitious enough, but are you kind of like accepting of all goals? Or do you feel like you're someone who's trying to work with a specifically highly motivated group of people? Or how do you kind of like navigate through that as a coach? Because I've changed over the years, because I was like the person I'm putting down now, where I would just tell people, well, if you only want to do this just because you want to look good for your vacation in a month, and this isn't for you. Whereas now I'm like, heck yeah, man, let's get you ready for vacation. Let's do this. This is what we got to do, X, Y, and Z. So have you kind of like changed with that over the years, or do you find that you're kind of stuck one way or the other, or have you always been one way or the other? How do you feel about coaching people for like lower level goals, especially those that are like ego driven?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to touch on the first part of that question, when you were talking about ego, I feel very similar about what, your mindset behind it was. Ego is not always a bad thing. And I think what plays in with ego is just affirmation, and to the guy that's, flexing in the mirror, in his mind, he's probably telling himself like, man, I looked better than I did a month ago. This is amazing. And if that's what's sparking him to go, then give him the go. And I think we can all agree at times there is moments where it's like, okay, subconsciously, even myself to this day, if I see someone doing it, I'm like, oh, look at that guy. And then I sit back and I'm like, well, hey, maybe he struggled with something for a while, and maybe he had body dysmorphia, or he broke through something, or, had a really defining moment in his life that got him in here. And now he's making progress. And then I kind of flip that switch and I'm like, Austin, get out of trainer brain and realize that that is a real person with a real story. And he made something happen. And that is amazing. But when it comes to the client aspect of it, up front, as a coach, obviously we want to see, like you said, maybe some more ambitious goals, because at the end of the journey, it feels a little bit more satisfactory, or the reward feels bigger. But at the end of the day, if someone comes to me and they're like, hey, I want to fit my, wedding dress a little better, or, hey, I want to lose a couple pounds before the beach. If that's their goal, short term, absolutely. Because what can happen is that can snowball. They go into it because they want to lose 15 pounds, and that's what they have written on the chalkboard, and they have a check mark by it. And we get them to that goal. That could spark interest in a whole other realm of possibilities. And that could make that person want to stay with this long term. And there's little factors that come into play with that. If someone comes to me and they're like, hey, I want to lose, 60 pounds over the course of the next XYZ amount of months. Okay, there's a lot more framework that goes into finding that out, and how we have to, progress their progress, how we have to, set up their program, how their diet, everything comes into play. But if someone comes to me and they're like, hey, 15 pounds, let's say 3 months. All right, that's super easy to dial in. Let's figure this out and let's get you to that goal. So I would say, yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that you have to take into consideration as a trainer and as a client. Before you come to a trainer, you want to understand what your goal is. And that's where a lot of people, who go to trainers, they just might not know what their goal is. Maybe they've been going to the gym for the, past couple months, maybe a year, and they're like, man, I'm not making any progress. What am I doing wrong? Is something wrong with my body? Am I not doing the right things? And they might not know their goal. And that's the thing as a coach, is that you have to meet them in the middle and figure out where they're at, and find out what their goal really is. Is it weight loss? Do they want to look better? And just kind of finding out, where you can get them starting out to hopefully get them to a little bit more long-term.
One, a lot of times I think that you'll find, it's funny because Justin and I actually just talked about this at the gym today when we were squatting, is I think that with people who, I don't want to say low ambition, but their goals are very, very easily attainable.
Yes.
A lot of times those people's goals change when you work with them. Right. So you don't have to get someone in your client load and say, hey man, I know you said you wanted to get abs for the beach next month, but I think that we could do so much more. Let's do this, because that stuff kind of happens organically. Mm-hmm. Like we were talking about someone at the gym specifically who said they wanted to gain 10 pounds. And this person was probably like $140 or so. Said he just wanted to gain 10 pounds. And, I thought immediately, until you gain 10 pounds. And I said to Justin and the guys when we were training today, I said, yeah, at one point I only wanted to bench 135. Right. And I'm sure, Justin, with you, it's even more pronounced because you were coming from a place of not only zero ability, but no ability to do certain things. So like, I'm sure at one point, like you could even walk us through that mentally now, looking back, like your goals have changed insanely over the years as far as what you thought was capable, what you thought was possible, all that sort of thing.
So before I mean, if you want me to do that, I can, but before I do that, I actually have a question for both of you. Do you enjoy having somebody who's wishy-washy in their goals? So you get a client, right? And the first thing they want is abs. So you build a program to make them have abs. And then 6 weeks goes by and everything they're talking about suggests that they want something completely different. Do you enjoy the process of helping them iron out what their actual goals are?
I'll take that one first, Austin.
Mhm.
And because I think my answer might be different than yours, I don't want to assume, but I'm going to say no, I don't like it.
No.
Because it's an extensive amount of more work for me.
Mm-hmm.
However, I welcome it with open arms because it certainly makes me a better communicator and a better coach. So I'm not, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that I don't like it, but if given the two, just think of it foundationally. It's a lot easier if someone comes to me with a clear goal versus someone who comes to me and says, like, for example, I'll use the car analogy. Yeah. Like that's a perfect one, like with the jumper cables and stuff. If someone comes to me and I'm driving the car and they say, "Hey, I want to go to New York City," I'll say, "Okay." And then I'll get them to New York City. If someone gets in the car and says, "Hey, I want you to take me somewhere, but I don't know where I want to go until I get there," well, then it's going to be really, really difficult for me to drive around spot to spot and try to figure out where this person wants me to take them.
Right.
So I definitely would prefer them to come with clear and concise goals. But like I said, and I'm not just saying this because I know that it may sound corny, but I do welcome obstacles like that because I feel like it makes me a better communicator and a better coach. So what are your thoughts on that, Austin? Do you disagree? Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with you. And like I said earlier, sometimes you just have to get out of coach brain, trainer brain, and you have to realize that, if someone like comes to us and they're like, "Hey, I want abs," and that's the first thing that they want to talk about. And, that's the goal. You set the plan up. And then, as their training evolves, they find out that, hey, maybe I enjoy powerlifting, or maybe I want to train a certain way, or I want to do this, I want to do that. You got to adapt to it. And like you said, would it be easier if they came to, us as trainers with one clear and concise goal? Absolutely. But from a client standpoint, they view you as a trainer as the person who has all the information. Hey, if I come to you with a question, even if you don't know it, I expect you to hopefully find it out and tell me what the answer is. So, things are going to happen, and it's not just maybe their goals change, but another way that you could look at it is if you're working with a client and then they have an injury and you have to change their whole training program around, it would be something similar to that. So either way, it's like you don't expect it to happen, and you would not want the injury or their change of mindset and programming to happen, but it's something that you just have to roll with. So as a coach, and I agree with what you said, Charlie. It's a part of becoming a better communicator, and it tests your abilities as a coach to figure out, okay, we just worked with them for the past couple months doing, XYZ. Now they're wanting to flip the switch and do this. How can I phase their programming into this without completely changing their training mindset? And, trying to adapt them into that new training modality.
Yeah. And I think that the bottom line, and we can all kind of attest to this, is that changing of goals while being mildly inconveniencing is probably just part of the game and okay. And then, so let's work back to that then, like we asked you, Justin, what was your mentality and how your goals have changed over the years? Because you, for one, I can say, Justin, we're always like, at least in my eyes, we're always someone who set low level and high level goals at the same time.
Yeah.
So my low level goal is I want to be able to walk a mile when I first start. But my high level goal is I want to do
an Ironman.
And I feel like the low level goals change with ability, and the high level goals kind of change with experience and interest.
Like with desire.
Yeah.
So I've always been very ambitious, like internally ambitious. So I fall in love with aspects of this journey almost daily. So it was hard, and I felt bad, honestly, from an athlete or a client standpoint. For you, I felt bad over the years because one day you're helping me train to be an endurance runner, and that's all your mind is thinking about, because that's what all my mind was thinking about yesterday. And now I want to be a powerlifter. And you're like, well, crap, what am I supposed to do with that? And I get it, but it was hard because I was sedentary for so long that once I freed myself, so to speak, it was like trying to chain a dog to a tree with a 3-foot chain and give them crack. and get them to sit still. That's not going to happen. Like I wanted to do everything. As soon as I do it, I'm like, I love it. I want to do it tomorrow. I want to do it forever. So I don't know.
Well, the ironic part about you saying that, how that could potentially be frustrating to me, the irony of that statement is the fact that I started out this podcast by saying that I have the same issue.
Yeah.
Where sometimes over the years, my goals and ambitions and what I wanted to quote master in has kind of morphed and changed.
Yeah.
But I think that, in Austin, I'm sure you agree with this. The one thing that the three of us can all probably agree on is we're lucky to be in an industry or in a kind of like a realm with fitness and health that there is so much overlap and carryover between different subtopics.
Mhm.
So if I want to be a bodybuilder, or I want to be an endurance athlete, or I want to be performance based in something like powerlifting or crossfitting, all of these kind of revolve around central themes: eating on a consistent diet or nutrition plan, or some semblance of nutrition structure, and then training, physical activity. So even if your physical goal is, more endurance based, or if you want to run obstacle course races like we talked about earlier, whatever, you're going to build muscle tissue when you're doing that. You're going to lose fat while you're doing that. Same thing with lifting weights. Lifting weights metabolically is highly beneficial. You're going to lose fat.
Absolutely.
Probably more so lifting weights than doing cardio, in a sense. So I think that we're lucky where we can kind of branch out into different avenues time to time and still not lose sight of what our main goal is. Like for me, Austin, I've talked on the podcast before that my main goal is how I look.
Right.
And because that's, competitively speaking, that's the name of the game. Like, when, as much as I love the mobility and the performance aspects and how strong I am, you never get on stage and say, okay, who's got the biggest bench press here? That's
Right.
the person who wins in bodybuilding. That's never going to happen. It's obviously solely on looks, who appears to have the biggest chest or the best arms or the combination of whatever. So I feel like because we have so much overlap, we can still stay true to those things while experimenting. Because I've experimented, Justin. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. You've experimented with a lot, and you have done like endurance events, and that's
I'll probably continue that,
I'm sure. And because there's carryover into whatever other things you want to try. So I think that specialization, at least in the fitness industry, can oftentimes lead places you don't want to go. I think because people don't understand the ramifications of extremes. So like if you're focused on being a power lifter, the extremes of that are over. Like if you're truly all in with to the highest degree, doing all in is going to take years off your life of pretty much anything. I remember, have you seen, Austin, have you seen West Side versus the World?
Yeah, no, I love Louis Simmons and the West Side guys. I've actually had the pleasure of training with some of the guys, and oh my goodness, are they dedicated?
Yeah.
Like there's guys that drive from West Virginia to Central Ohio every single day just to train at West Side so they don't lose their spot.
Yep. And they don't care. That is the definition of being all in. And I remember in the documentary, so anybody who hasn't seen it, Justin, have you seen it?
West Side Against the World?
West Side versus the World.
I think I've seen part of it.
Okay.
I don't think I've watched the whole thing.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Well, there's one part where Louis is talking about a young and up and coming kid who comes to the gym who wants to be the strongest that he can be. And Louis tells him, get as big as you can get and take as many drugs as you can. And now that's kind of obviously sensationalized a little bit, but the point here is that those guys are living in absolute extremes. So I think that sometimes when people focus on one particular goal and they don't have balance in their fitness and their health, sometimes it could lead them down a path that they don't want to go, and they don't even realize that they're going down it. It would be like someone who focuses entirely on hypertrophy and being a bodybuilder. There are some performance aspects that are going to take a hit because of that. Especially when you're in the off season, you may walk up the stairs and get out of breath, or you may get a head rush just from bending over trying to tie your shoes, or your sleep is going to suffer because you have severe sleep apnea, or you have orthopedic issues from high volume training, high intensity training, or whatever. So I think that, Austin, the way your training is structured and the way it sounds like you are with your clients, I feel like you probably do a pretty good job of giving people a lot of balance in their life and in their training. And I think that part of that stems from how you coined yourself. Because prior to starting, Justin and I, just talking to the listeners here, Justin and I asked Austin, what's your title? How do you want to be introduced? Are you an online coach? Are you a performance specialist? And the one thing that you said was lifestyle coach. And I think that because it's so much deeper than I coach people to get stronger, I coach people to be better athletes. Right. I am a lifestyle coach because of the balance that needs to come with that, not only in the fitness realm or the health realm, but also the balance that needs to come in life. I mean, do you run into that a lot, Austin, where you have people that have, they have the ambition and they have the direction? So those are two things that we talked about them needing. They need to be highly motivated, and yeah, they have a specific goal, but do you run into people who have zero balance when they approach training with you, and you need to kind of guide them to that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, normally what happens is, and I've noticed this, is that when people first find fitness, they fall into one of the, maybe not extremes, but they want to specialize in one thing. So, and where I've seen this very prominently is in the CrossFit space. Yep. When people get into CrossFit, they get into CrossFit. Like they are head over heels in love with it. And they love everything about that sport and that training modality. And that's the only thing that they specialize in. And then when you have people that come and they're like, hey, well, I want to get just stronger. And you got like the West Side guys that are power lifters, and that's the only thing that they want to do. They become so, embellished in everything that training is. And they have a hard time steering away from that when there's benefits in every different aspect of training. In my opinion, I think you can learn anything from anything. Heck, I even learned stuff from yoga. Yeah. And, here I am, I'm a guy, I'm this trainer. And I love, hey, I'm going to try this yoga pose and I'm going to see what I can find out from it. And that's kind of what happened to me. So when I first got into it, I wanted to train like a bodybuilder, high volume, high frequency, hypertrophy, just doing very isolated, exercises, trying to grow. And then I was like, I also want to try out Muay Thai. And I realized very quickly that my style of training and the volume and frequency that I was doing was not going to correlate very well with my goal of Muay Thai. And I had to sit back and I had to realize, okay, well, what can I do to elicit the best results for both while still maintaining, proper recovery and not overdrawing myself to the points where I'm just going to get burnt out and not want to do this anymore. So that's when I adopted, hey, I'm going to train more performance and mobility based like an athlete. And, I still squat, I still bench, I still overhead press, I still deadlift, but at the same time, I'm implementing mobility drills. I'm trying to become more fundamental as an athlete as a whole. And I truly wholeheartedly believe that if you are someone who routinely goes to the gym, you are a fitness athlete. No matter if you're a beginner or if you're, 20 years in the game, if you routinely go to the gym, you are a fitness athlete. You are practicing a sport. Maybe it's weightlifting, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's, training for OCR, obstacle course racing. You become an athlete to the whatever you're dedicating yourself to. So you have to train as such, and you have to make sure that you're doing the things in a way, shape, or form that's going to also allow you to, live your life and not be, like one of the West Side guys where you wake up at, 3:00 in the morning to drive 2 hours just to train with Louie. And then, you're just beating yourself up for 6 hours. Yeah. I hope that answered your question.
No, it absolutely does. And I got to give credit to Justin, honestly, because since I've been training with him, not just in our recent resurgence of training together, but even over the years. And he's always been one of those people that you've always, Justin, got crazy ideas of things that you've seen or wanted to try, which has helped get me out of my comfort zone. Now, when I say that, most people think comfort zone is okay, I'm afraid to push the limits. I'm not afraid to push the limits, but I generally tend to stay in my lane. Yeah. So I'll push the limits of movements, exercises, training styles that I enjoy doing and that I'm comfortable with. Whereas Justin will come in one day and say, hey, I saw this, let's try this. And over the years, I've become increasingly more receptive to that. And I think that kind of gets a bad rap is things like Instagram or TikTok, where people see these things and oh, so-and-so just does things they see on Instagram. Well, there's a lot of cool stuff that you should try because you don't know if it works until you try it.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't know if you like it until you try it.
Sure. There's things over the years that I thought that I would love that I absolutely hate, and things that I thought I would hate that I absolutely fell in love with, like the obstacle course racing.
Right.
Like I never in a million years thought that that would be something that I would have any interest in doing. And I remember when, shout out to Josh Morosi, who is a former guest of the podcast, who was, I don't want to say formerly a friend, like he isn't a friend anymore, but he was a friend before we recorded. And Josh over the years has had, I think, upwards of 20 world records, and he's pound for pound one of the greatest squatters to ever live. He squatted, I think, at 148. He squatted 635 at 148 raw and tested.
Wow.
And Josh was the one who created a challenge for me to do an obstacle course race. He called me up one day and it's like, dude, you're all about this. He said, you're all about the talk. He's like, you need to walk the walk. I'm challenging you and calling you out. You got to do this with me. And the whole time I'm thinking, God, I am going to hate this. And Justin knows, like, first thing when I came back, I was like, dude, I love it. You got to get on board with this.
Yeah.
So I think that being open and being receptive and welcoming to things that are like outside of, again, I don't want to say outside of your comfort zone, because that generally lets people believe that it's outside of you willing to push, but it's outside of your comfort zone in the sense of outside of things that you're used to. That's going to be highly, highly beneficial to you.
Yeah. And I always say, sometimes the best thing that you can do for your body is what you're not doing. If you become so adapted to a certain style of training, and then you throw a new stimulus at it, your body's going to react to that. Your body's going to, be taking all of that in, a different way of training, and you're going to see benefits from it. So Charlie, were you doing bodybuilding before you tried OCR?
Yes.
Okay. So what were the benefits that you saw for you when you went from bodybuilding into training for OCR and then competing OCR? I'm sure you saw some benefits.
So to be completely transparent, I did not train
for any
type of endurance or obstacle course races. No, not at all. I just went in completely blind. When I got challenged to it, I had 1 month to prepare and did not do anything. I didn't change anything in the course of that month. And to be truthful, I told people that I'm glad I didn't, because I would have trained the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I told Justin that all the time. I would have trained running, whereas there's so many obstacles that the cardiovascular endurance isn't that bad. It's more full system endurance, like grip work and core, that just gets absolutely crushed. And then your legs, of course, from climbing things and jumping on things and jumping off of things. So even if I would have trained, I probably wouldn't have been that much in a better position, because I would have trained the wrong things. But I see that in competing in the OCR, the obstacle course races, one of the things that I saw, and this sounds very, very corny, and I don't want to be hyperbolic with it and make it sound like it was completely revolutionary for me, but understanding lack of limits. And I actually think that after that, I made a post about limitations and how I realized that there truly are none in human performance when it comes to things that you think that you're capable of, because I thought there was no way I'm going to be able to finish this. Like I've never even, like the first one I did was a 5K. So 3.1 miles with like 20 obstacles. I think I've only ever walked a 5K a handful of times, let alone actually done one with 20 obstacles.
Right.
It like interspersed in between. So like, I never would have thought I would have been able to do it. But then I realized, like, not only could I do it, but I performed higher above my expectations that I had anticipated. And then I scheduled another one, and then I scheduled a third one. So I kept doing them. And I think that that's really what it boiled down to, is maybe not carry over physically. I don't know if that's what you were asking for, but mentally, just that there are no limits and you can do a lot more than you think that you do. So it makes me wonder when people get into these lanes, so to speak, like, hey, this is my lane. I'm a bodybuilder and I stay in this lane. It makes me wonder if part of the reason they stay in a particular lane is not only because of genuine interest, but I wonder if there's also a piece with people that stays in that particular lane because lack of confidence elsewhere. Right. Like I've never ran because I feel like I hate running, but I've also always said, oh, I would be good at distance. I mean, Justin, when he was training for distance events and competing in 5Ks, I did a couple with you. And I would always preface the event by saying, I'm not going to be good at this, or I'm terrible at distance running, or I have no endurance, or whatever it is, just because that was kind of what I thought. But then when I actually competed a little bit more regularly, and I don't want to say competed because it's not like I was striving for world record breaking times here, but when I pushed myself a little bit, I realized, oh crap, I guess I can do this.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that was the biggest carryover for me, was just the fact of knowing that I was capable of more than I thought that I was.
There's so many questions with the limited time I have left now that sparked, like, that I could ask you both. Like, do you think it's important to, as a coach or a trainer, to recognize when people are falling short and like perceiving their own abilities?
Austin, you want to take that one first?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's always going to be some form of pitfall with the mental barrier, and I'm huge on human behavior when it comes into changing your lifestyle. And a lot of people, especially if they're completely new and novice to training, they come in and they're shocked when they finally, hit a PR, or I show them how to do a movement, and then they do it with correct form and they feel it where they're supposed to be feeling it. And it's definitely important to, understand where you need to meet that client. But at the same time, it is important to, voice out a little bit of, hey, I think you should try to implement this, and getting a little bit outside of your box. And whenever I take in a client, sometimes I put them in a little box. Like, okay, they're this age range, they're this weight, they're, this is their type of current lifestyle. And at times I have to be like, well, hey, maybe they would enjoy this type of training, even though it's not super, detrimental to what I'm trying to make them do. I think they would enjoy it. And, when I first started to train Muay Thai, never in a million years did I ever think I would enjoy getting kicked and punched in the face by other men for an hour and a half, 2 times a week, but I love it. And it's just something about knowing that I took that leap of faith, and I tried to, step outside of my box on my own, so I could become a little bit more universal with what I do in and out of the gym, so it wasn't so linear. And I realized, while there wasn't a ton of physical carryover other than, the cardiovascular and endurance aspect of Muay Thai, I realized that, wow, this does take some courage to step in and spar against guys twice my size. And once I realized that, hey, I can do this, then I can probably do a lot more than this. And that's kind of where I fell in love with the ideal behind, human behavior and what makes us tick, and what's your why? And I know that sounds cliche, but I'm huge on that. Why do you do what you do?
I don't think people are self-assessing enough to go through and look at why they do things. And I think that that's something, again, it falls back to communication. You just have to be a little bit more communicable with people and pull that out of them. If you're a good coach, I feel like you know how to ask the right questions.
Right.
That's kind of a strategy that I personally got from teaching. I mean, I work with 5th graders. So there's a lot of prompting and questioning that goes into, you just have to understand what questions to ask, when to ask them, and how to ask them to get the answer that you're looking for. And you can really work your way around some problems as a coach if you know how to ask people their why. Because sometimes it's not as simple as saying, well, why do you do this? Because a lot of people, a lot of times they'll get the response, I don't know. And honestly, again, another tinge of irony on my part was, I said that earlier. I don't know why I bodybuild. I have not identified that why yet, because it's just something that has innately been present in me for years.
Right.
So speaking of why, Austin, one of the things that we do, and I use the term we kind of as a misnomer, unfortunately, because Justin was the one who started this tradition and put these questions together, and we've used it ever since. When we first started with the podcast, one of the things that we've done is ask every guest we've had on a series of questions to kind of close out and summarize things and bring them full circle, because we want to bring everything back to the Chasing Dreams theme. So what Justin did is, early on when we first started, he came up with a series of questions that were specifically geared towards the Chasing Dreams theme that we ask each and every guest to kind of close out the show and summarize things. So what we'll do is Justin's going to read you these questions. Now there's several of them, so we'll read them all at once just to kind of give you an overview, and then we'll circle back around to question 1 and give you some response time to kind of like analyze these. And we used to give these questions to the listener, to the guest up front, whereas now we've kind of sprung them on them last minute. So hopefully
have that organic.
Yeah, the little authenticity piece is a little bit better served when it's fresh. So go ahead, Justin, and read the questions for us.
So, what does the phrase chasing dreams mean to you? Do you feel as though you've chased your dreams thus far? And how do you continue to chase your dreams and help others do the same?
All right. So circle back to the first question then.
So what does the phrase chasing dreams means to you?
Okay. So chasing dreams. And first and foremost, I love your guys' podcast name. That's awesome.
I gotta give credit. That's credit to Justin once again for that as well. That was completely his idea. Actually, the podcast as a whole was his idea. I've always been pretty transparent about this. Is when we started it, I always thought, well, I'll do this. I don't think it's going to work or go anywhere, but if Justin wants to try it, we'll try it for a week or two and see where we get. And
117 weeks later.
Yeah, here we are over 2 years later, recording every week straight without missing a week for over 2 years. We've continued it. So we appreciate that, or I'm sure Justin appreciates that more considering it was his baby, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the simple fact that you guys are doing this for over 2 years just kind of goes into your name, chasing dreams. And for me, when I sit back and I think about chasing dreams, I think about, kind of compounding everything that we've talked about in this podcast today. Understanding, what made me get into this, what made me fall in love with it. Was it when I got my first copy of, Arnold's bodybuilding encyclopedia? Was it the time I bought my first supplement? Was it the time that, I realized that my body's changing when I looked in the mirror and I saw a change? Or was it the first time that I helped a client, reach their goal? It was a little bit of everything, and it compounds. And to this day, I don't really have a clear and concise answer of what chasing your dreams is, because it changes every day. And that's the awesome part about this journey, is that every day you find out something new, or you realize something about yourself that you didn't know maybe a month prior, and you get to adapt you get to turn the wheel a little bit, and now you're on this path. So yeah, I mean, chasing dreams is just, adapting to your circumstances and, doing whatever you can to prevail and to continue to help change lives and, change your own life.
And don't you think that it's pretty cool that was kind of an undertone of one of the, because when you interview people, you always have several themes that consistently pop up over the course of the hour or so. And one of the things that we've talked about extensively today was the fact that dreams, directions, goals can change, and that's okay. Yeah. In fact, that kind of makes you well-rounded and balanced.
So absolutely. I loved your first answer. So your next question is, do you feel as though you've chased your dreams thus far?
Absolutely. Without a doubt. And maybe that plays into the ego factor, oh, well, this guy, he's egotistical. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that, all of us, on this call right now, doing this podcast, we've all had to chase our dreams at one point in time, because at one point in time, we fell flat on our ass and we had to figure it out, and we had to figure it out quick. And when I started eliciting change and seeing that progress and understanding that this can be a fundamental part of my life and I could live this life every single day and love it, I would definitely say, yeah, I'm chasing my dreams.
Awesome. And then the final question is, how do you continue to chase your dreams and then help others do the same?
Okay. Continuing to chase my dreams, I think a journey begins with 1,000 miles, but it can be started by a single step, so the moment you take that first step, your journey starts, and you got to do it. As corny as that sounds, if this is something that you want to invest your time in, and Justin, you're a prime example of this, man. When you first started, I don't think you ever really looked back. There might've been times where your progress wasn't, super direct, and you've had to adjust accordingly. But I think, continuing to chase your dreams just means just keep going. Like you said, don't quit. Just, make sure that you have a plan. And even if that plan changes, you adapt.
True.
And, how do I continue to help people change, and chase their dreams? I would say just, provide value every single day. This podcast probably provides a lot of people value. Me, giving little tidbits of advice when it's warranted provides value. and just being open as a coach and as a husband and as family member, brother, son, every aspect of your life. It's not just fitness, even though this is aimed around more fitness and health and lifestyle, it's every single day. If you're going to be about it, you got to live it. And I try my best to do that. I'm not perfect, but at the end of the day, I know I have, a lot of knowledge and a pretty good understanding of what's going to help people. So just providing value every day is how I'm going to
really
help
like
people.
How you said value, because I don't know what started that with me, but that's one of the things that I've done lately when I talk to people is I actually phrase it like that. With using the term value, I ask people, clients particularly, but just because you're not paying me doesn't mean you don't deserve any value that I can provide. But I ask people that all the time. Like, I'll message people and say, hey, what value can I bring to you today? Is there any value that I can give you today? Because
absolutely,
going back to your self-proclaimed title that a lot of us use as well, being a life coach is not just, hey, how can I fix your diet today? How can I fix your training today? How can we adjust your supplements today? It can be, what value can I bring you? Is there any value that I can bring you? Do you need me to physically bring you something? Is there something I can do? Can I shovel your driveway? Can I give you words of encouragement? Can I tweak your diet? Like, it's a lot more broad than just fitness specific. So I really like that, because that's something that Justin and I can both relate to, because I've been using the value phrase as of late. And Justin, that's something that you said is, how can you make people's lives better? And kind of sparked literally everything you've done.
Yeah.
Is how can I make people happier?
That's my whole goal in life, is to make a positive change in somebody's life every day.
That's awesome.
I really have enjoyed this interview, and like, your answers to the questions have been solid. It was fun for sure.
Yeah, that was a good time, guys.
It's very cool, because I feel like, actually, Austin, before we recorded, Justin said a couple of times, actually 2 or 3 times, he said, man, you're going to really like talking to Austin, because it's like talking to you. Like, I feel like you guys are really, really similar. And sometimes it's interesting, because your interpretation of yourself is different from people's interpretation of you.
Yeah.
And people's interpretation of you can be completely different. Like, I'm sure the way I am at the gym, the way that I am at school, the way that I am at clients, the way that I am at home, largely different. And I don't want to say that like I'm two-faced, but I consider myself to kind of be a chameleon, where I can kind of adapt to the people that I'm around in terms of professionalism, in terms of self-conduct, in terms of what that person needs from me or expects from me. But that said, I did feel like there's a lot of like similarities. Like, I'm like, wow, man, this guy just in answers you gave as a coach, I feel like some of my philosophical beliefs as a coach were very, very similar. So that was kind of refreshing, and kind of lets me know, because when you look at any kind of job, even if someone's not doing millions and millions of dollars in client intakes a month, that's not necessarily indicative, again, of value.
Right.
Because I mean, as well as anybody, Austin, that online coaching can be something that's highly, highly lucrative. And just because someone's making the most amount of money or has the most amount of clients doesn't mean they're the best coach. In fact, it's usually the opposite. So,
unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right. But it's really cool to see someone like yourself who provides a lot of value to say some of the things that I believe in very similarly, because it's kind of validation.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm on the right track. I must be doing something right. So that's refreshing and reassuring for me on a personal level. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you guys for having me on. I met Justin through a family member. He's a friend of Justin's, and ever since the start of this, we've been having little chats in the morning on our commute to work. And Justin's told me the same. He's like, yeah, man, you and Charlie, you guys are going to hit it off. And sure enough, we did. And likewise, Charlie, I'm glad that, that there's still people out there that have the same, moral construct and mindset behind what we do. And it makes me feel good, because at times I sit back and I look at the space and I get a little discouraged, but, realizing that there's people out there like yourself and like Justin that truly just want to help people. At the end of the day, it kind of gives you a sigh of relief. And it's like, man, this is why I do it. This is why, I'm chasing my dreams and doing all of this.
Now, real quick, before we close up shop, we'd be remiss if we didn't allow you the opportunity to plug yourself. So obviously you've provided us with a lot of value, hopefully, well, certainly the listeners with a lot of value, but hopefully there's some people that listened to what you said today and that kind of resonated with them. And maybe they want to reach out to you for some coaching. So how do people get a hold of you? We talked before and you said you're mostly on Instagram. So could you plug your handle, plug your contact information, and kind of give yourself almost like a 60-second self-promotional commercial here?
Yeah. So you can either reach out to me on Instagram at the Austin Culver, or you can reach out to my wife on Instagram, which is Janelle, JANEL _ Culver, CULV is in Victor, ER, or you can reach out to me via email. I do have a coaching email that you can inquiry about. Give me 1 second here. Oh my goodness, it didn't pop up. Give me 1 second.
No, that's fine. While you're searching for that too, I want to say that this is probably a good segue into a second interview with your wife on call as well. So hopefully sometime Justin and I can do a second interview with you and her, because I think that would bring massive value to people.
Right along with the theme.
Yeah.
Massive value.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. So we went through a name change for our coaching business. So you can find us at culvercoaching@gmail.com. So I had to ask the wife real quick, but yeah, I would love to have my wife on as well. She has a lot of similar mindsets, and give me 1 second. She's hollering back at me. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm sorry.
You're fine. I like the alliteration of the Culver coaching.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is Culver Fitness Coaching. So CFC, I suppose. Sorry about that, guys. Listeners, I didn't mean to lead you astray. We went through a name change, like I said, but yeah, to circle back around, my wife, she has a lot of great knowledge, just as much as me, and she's a great female standpoint. So,
and sometimes that's a comfort level for people. I've noticed that a lot of female clients like working with a female coach because there's a little bit more relatability there as well.
Absolutely.
So Austin, we really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much for providing a ton of value for our listeners, and we look forward to having you back on. So with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast. We are on episode 117. We appreciate all of your listenership, and we look forward to hearing back from you guys next week. Unbreakable.